you may have surmised from the meditation tonight, I was very much wanting to talk about this paradox that as you settle into the present moment, as in some way you let the attention rest and go deeper into what I'm calling the well of being, of presence, being present moment to moment with things. What we observe changes. One of the deep teachings of Buddhism is dependent co-arising. I'm not going to try to go too far into that tonight because it's a very complex subject, very deep. But for my purpose tonight, I'm going to just point out how the way the world appears and the way consciousness is are interdependent and co-arise. So as stillness arises, or as you become the stillness that you already are, the phenomenon around you, what we call the world, also changes. We notice different things. It's not as though there's just a world out there already now real that we just look at. We actually, our consciousness is very much involved in the world that manifests. And when we shift our consciousness, we often shift our perception in very, very basic ways. One of the ways is as you meditate, you may start to feel energy in the body. You may start to feel the subtle body. It's not the subject of this class, but it's something that can happen as your consciousness shifts. You actually wake up to the fact that there's a body in the body, which is the movement of energy. And that can actually be felt. Can actually, in certain states of mind, feel the channels which Chinese medicine outlines in the body. They can be seen and perceived, felt directly. So that's maybe a more extreme example. But one that's probably closer to home is the way that as your attention settles, something opens up in our experience of the body. And I was pointing to that a bit tonight. If you actually get beyond the concept of things, and that's a big shift in consciousness, because we tend to live our lives through the filter of our ideas of things. But if you get beyond that, if your consciousness shifts in the meditation, you can begin to feel how what we call the body, what we name as the body, is not this solid thing. It's a living, changing thing, as known from the inside. Certainly from known from the outside, we can see changes in the body, definitely. Changes in our posture, changes as we age, changes in just the way our body feels. I've been doing this strength training class on Tuesdays, and believe me, my body feels differently tonight than it feels on most nights. Sort of sore and having used up a lot of the muscular energy. There's a kind of a calm, I think, that comes with it. So that's just a way more externally than what I'm talking about. It's still a feeling. It's still an internal experience, but it's, I think, still a little farther from the really precise noting that you can have in meditation, where, for example, you feel your lips together and suddenly you notice that they're not still, that they're actually moving constantly. The muscles in your lips are moving constantly. It's actually the case your muscles everywhere in your body are moving constantly. It's just you have maybe the nerve endings in the lips to feel it more precisely. But I know in deeper states of meditation, I've felt the muscles moving in my cheek, the muscles moving in my forehead, the muscles moving in my eyelids. They're constantly kind of expanding and contracting. That's what muscles do. And you can read about that in a book, of course, and just know that conceptually. But in meditation, you can actually experience it directly. And part of why that's important is as you settle more and more into the present moment, you see the living, changing world around you, and the living, changing body that you are, and the living, changing mind that you are. Not just thoughts arising and passing, but very states of consciousness constantly shifting, where you might settle into a deep state of tranquility. And then a little later in the meditation, you start to get agitated, start to squirm, start to wonder how much time is left, and really don't want to be there. And this isn't the same body, the same mind. But things just don't stay still. It's just the nature of reality. Things don't stay still. And yet there's a still point right at the heart of it all, which I call awareness. It's that stillness from which all of this is known. So that as you settle into that stillness, you can kind of watch how everything kind of moves through the stillness that you are. This is our last class for the 8-class series. It's like, well, where did all that go? It's like through the present moment, all of this time kind of keeps passing. These days, these hours, these minutes, they pass like a river. And what notices them stays still. Though that's not always apparent. It's not always apparent that what notices them stays still, especially if we're really attached to our thoughts and our moods and so forth. We just kind of are drug all over the place. So when we talk about the well of being, we're talking about that kind of coming to a place of noticing that is unmoving. You don't, in a sense, have to do it because it's what you are, but there is a way you have to do it in that you have to notice it. You have to notice this place through which your experience moves. As is what I'm saying right now is kind of moving through it. The actual sound of my words. If you listen to the sounds of my words for a moment, you'll see that kind of passing moment-to-momentness. When you're caught up in just hearing the meaning of the words, that's maybe not quite as easy to capture. But if you notice the meaning of the words, then you'll notice the mind sometimes like waiting till I finish a sentence to know what I say. And then you'll have this sort of insight, oh, I get that. And then you'll move on. There's this moment-to-momentness of even the mind in relationship to speech. So this whole kind of consciousness is what's called vipassana in this tradition, clear seeing. The clear seeing of the momentary nature of experience. And the clear seeing of its insubstantiality is insubstantial because it changes, But even then, if you feel a sensation like the touch of your hands together, and you go very deeply into that, into what it actually is, and you get beyond the concept of two hands touching each other to the direct experience, it tends to dissolve into vibration, pressure. But you go into pressure, and that's a kind of a vibration, pulsing. It's a very different experience. And as you begin to do that, maybe the word insubstantial would describe the way that form of the hand loses its solidness as you go into the actual experiences that compose it. You may begin to get just a glimpse of what's called emptiness, of the emptiness of the mind. The Mind is this empty, open field in which phenomena appear. So right now, there's the hands touching each other appearing in the mind. And then it stops and they don't appear in the mind, at least not in that way. And the mind is kind of this pure, clear place of knowing, which is constantly refreshed so that things don't have to stick. That's not to say the mind doesn't have all sorts of ways of making things stick. Our memory makes things stick. Our emotions make things stick, so that something can seem to persist in the mind for a long time. You get upset about something and then you get upset about it, and it persists, as an experience. So it can sometimes feel like, it isn't like the mind is clear, clean. And yet it is. It's just some of the mechanisms of the mind make things get sticky in there. The suttas refer to this quality of the mind as sorrowless, stainless, and secure. You hear that and you go like, well, where? Sorrowless? This world is so full of sorrow. It's so full of pain. Where is the sorrowless? Where is a place that's sorrowless? Words can't do it justice. But as you discover this standpoint, if I can call it that, in experience, this still point, this place of being awareness, it is itself without sorrow, even though what it knows might be sorrow. And it's stainless. Whatever comes into your experience doesn't taint it at all. It's ready for the next experience. Even though, of course, there are all these kind of mechanisms in our human brain that keep kind of bringing things back and making them sticky. But the actual clarity, the actual openness of the mind, or we could call it the heart, is stainless and secure. It's hard to find a secure place in this world. We certainly spend a lot of time and energy trying to create security for ourselves and for others. We want the security of a job. We want a security of an income so we can provide. We want a house. We want food. We need things as embodied beings. And yet, none of that is so secure. Even when you think you got it made, you don't necessarily know what's happening next. You don't necessarily know that these human systems that feed us or clothe us, or our monetary system, you don't necessarily know that they're going to persist or work well. So I don't say that to scare you, because I don't feel like that fear is such a helpful thing to live in. But to sober you in a certain way that there is something that's secure. And it's what you already are. As awareness, as Buddha. I can put it that way. That's why this is Buddhism, which is a funny kind of word, would mean awakenedism. If you translate it, Buddha, awakened. So it's to wake up to what you are as this openness of awareness, and to be stable in it and live from it. So that's really the depth of the well of being, is something that is sorrowless, stainless, and secure. Asokam virajam kemam. I find those words inspiring. And yet, it's not so easy to grasp. It's certainly not very easy to grasp conceptually, and I would implore you to give up. grasping it conceptually. But there are moments when you'll touch it. Notice them. Moments where you are just the space of noticing. And a breath happens right there in this space of noticing. And the body is manifest right there in this space of noticing. And the room is manifest right there in this space of noticing. And the sounds are manifest right in this space of noticing, and they're kind of passing through it because they're so bound by time. You know, the room you're in is bound by time too, but it's not so obvious. It's not so obvious, you know, that this plant grows. It's not so obvious, oh, there's something dings. You know, something goes ding. It's not so obvious that the walls are eventually going to fall down. That's not so obvious. So sound is more obvious, how it kind of is time bound and passing through the present moment. So as we sit in meditation, we sit amid this, amid change, amid insubstantiality. It's nice for that thing to interrupt us and show us how things are changing, but I'll turn it off. I don't need to hear my text come in. And so, I mean, I'll just mention another name that is sometimes confusing to people, but maybe perhaps with this talk you can get a glimpse of it. The deathless, the unborn, the deathless. We're not talking about something out in a heaven after you die. Though goodness, Buddhism has heaven and hell realms and all sorts of realms and so forth. If you want those things, they're there. But even if you were reborn in a heaven realm, the deathless would still be the same as it is here in this human realm. The deathless would be that space of knowing, that awareness. It would be the very same. So we don't need to die and go to a heaven realm to experience the eternal. It's right here. It in some way is the most obvious thing about here. The word here points to it. Spatially. Here. Here. And now points to it in terms of time. Here and now. If you die and are reborn in a heaven realm, what time will it be? Now. What place will it be? Here. Same as now. Same as here. All right, enough confounding speech.